Welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. I want to talk about a couple things that has come up. A statement made by the Arlington Carmelite Nuns in Texas. They have responded to the Vatican's response to their appeal. So I'm briefly going to cover what they have said in reaction to the Vatican's decision of rejecting 3 out of 4 of their appeals. Then I want to take a look at Bishop Conley's column on the ministry of America's bishop, where he addresses Pope Francis and some of his comments about American bishops. And then I want to briefly take a look at a lawsuit from the United States bishops against the Biden administration over abortion provisions in pregnant workers law. Okay, so start with the first one. So I said yesterday, as I was covering the situation of the appeals with the Arlington Nuns in Texas, I said, well, hey, when they give a response, we'll take a look at it. They did offer a response to what the Vatican has decided. Again, not in favor of most of their appeals. The only one that was accepted by the Vatican was the reinstatement of Mother Gerlach back to the consecrated life, but not as prioress. And so pretty much everything, including her removal as prioress, was upheld by the Vatican. And I said, look, they won't listen to the local bishop. They won't even let him on the property. They won't listen to the new prioress appointed to the Vatican by the Vatican. They won't even let her on the property. What else is left? This is just not a Catholic community. And but I said, hey, if they just do an about face and turn things around and say, okay, well, we will accept the Vatican's decision, then maybe there's a way to salvage their community. But it does not appear that they have responded reasonably or positively to the Vatican. And so I suspect an excommunication is coming for the whole community. Since it appears to me they're already materially in schism. It's just now a matter of going through the motions to make that a formal declaration. Okay, so let me share my screen and we'll take a look at the statement. Okay. On the morning of May 22nd, this is the nuns in Arlington. On the morning of May 22nd, the Diocese of Fort Worth published private decrees from the Holy See dated April 30th, 2024, and a statement from the Bishop of Fort Worth on their diocesan website. I don't think that they are private decrees, by the way. And I don't believe that the nuns at this point are entitled to any privacy, given that they are the ones who have brought the situation into the public sphere by suing the bishop. So I just found that to be odd. These decrees from the Holy See include one overturning Bishop Olson's peremptory and unlawful dismissal of our Mother Prioress from the Carmelite order last year on grounds of a mere technicality. So it wasn't actually entirely unlawful, but yeah, well, we covered it yesterday. It is time for Bishop Olson to apologize publicly and in person to us for this abusive act, which has now been publicly recognized as such by the Holy See. No, the Holy See didn't say that it was abusive, and the Holy See gave them 3 out of 4 negative judgments. Where's their apology to the bishop? If he owes them an apology, they owe him 3 other apologies. You see how that works? But no, he doesn't owe them an apology at all, by any means. They owe him, in the Catholic Church, in the whole church, an apology. All of us, every one of us Catholics, because they have scandalized the faithful with their behavior. In respect of the decrees upholding Bishop Olson's investigation of allegations against our Mother Prioress, we repeat that his investigations were flawed, carried out in an intimidatory manner, and violated her ecclesiastical and civil rights. It is reprehensible that medical evidence proving these allegations to be completely unfounded and fabricated has been ignored by the Holy See. Well, no, that isn't true. And it seems like we know what the facts are after we listen to the former prioress admit to a number of things in audio recordings. So this just doesn't work. But now they're trying to say that, the Holy See is the problem too. So it's not just the bishop now, it's also the papacy. So give it time. As I've said before, give it time. Probably sooner rather than later, they'll come out and say that they don't believe Francis is the Pope. In addition, we are surprised that as we learn from the decrees themselves, these matters were decided by the Holy See on March 12th, but were not communicated to us in April. Together with the other documents dated April 18th, we can only speculate that some authorities hoped that they would not have to deal with our recourses and that these issues would be swept under the carpet. You see how they're trying to put a spin on it? Because they didn't get a favorable judgment. We are profoundly disappointed that in the place of the dialogue about which they spoke so much, the relevant persons have once again chosen to resort to unproven narratives. They're the one with the unproven narratives, as opposed to audio recordings. Somebody asked in the chat, where can we listen to the recordings? I played every one of them on this channel. So just type in Arlington Nuns, it should come up. As stated in the Constitution, we are profoundly disappointed that in the place of dialogue about which they speak so much, the relevant persons have once again chosen to resort to unproven narratives and attempted public humiliation to achieve their ends. It's like they're possessed by a demon of gaslighting. It's incredible. They're the ones who have done that. They've attempted public humiliation of the bishop by suing him and slandering him. Like, how do they not see they are doing the very thing that they accuse others of doing? How can their psyche get so twisted and distorted? It's like there's some kind of demon fueling this. This includes the fact that the members of the community never obstructed the so-called investigation by Bishop Olson, except they did. As stated in the Constitution of the U.S. and seconded by Pope Francis himself, every person, including every religious woman, has the right to counsel. There was never an issue of them having a right to counsel. It was never the problem. For anyone, including a bishop, to try to stop a person from consulting a lawyer, civil or canonical, is obstruction of justice. But he didn't attempt to do that anyway. And why would they need to consult a lawyer? There's this whole verse in the New Testament that forbids this notion of a Christian suing another Christian, because we have our own ways of resolving the issues. And that's true when we have the canonical process. So, wow. On Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024, without any notice or warning, the president of the Carmelite Association of Christ the King, accompanied by another nun, attempted to enter Arlington Carmel in spite of the prohibition on her from doing so in our statement on April 20th, 24. You don't get to override the Pope. The Holy See has appointed her your prioress. So she doesn't have to warn you, and you don't get to say, no, you can't come here. Not if you want to still be Catholic. Now, if you don't want to be Catholic anymore, fine. But if you're going to be Catholic, you don't get to say that. The next day, she violated this prohibition again. She didn't violate any prohibition because you don't have any authority over her. She has authority over you. Again, if you want to be Catholic, she has authority over you. Now, if you don't want to be Catholic and you want to cast off the bonds of Jesus Christ, okay, then that's on you. But you can't still claim to be Catholic. We maintain our rejection of any takeover of our community or its assets. Why is trying to take over your community or your assets? This is psycho. Where in the world is this coming from? No, your former prioress that you continue to defend admitted to inappropriate behavior sexually. via electronic messages. She admitted to that, and therefore she was relieved of her duties. And you guys have been making excuses, and you've tried to sue the bishop, and you've tried to smear his name, and you've rejected him, and you're now rejecting the papacy. That's the problem. Nobody cares about your stupid assets. This is ridiculous. You think that the bishop cares about your little convent? Quite certain he has a whole lot more property that he has to manage. He doesn't care about your assets. I can guarantee it. What an absurd claim. As happened repeatedly to other monasteries of women in our country and throughout the world. We remain firm in following our Holy Mother, St. Teresa. Don't you dare mention her name. Don't you dare mention her name. You do not follow her. She would not approve of what you're doing. St. Teresa's directive that each monastery remain autonomous in its self-governance and life. You nuns are the same ones who agreed to the oversight of the local bishop, as the Vatican showed in their rejection of your appeal. They showed where your convent agreed to his oversight, and where the Pope has also said he has oversight of your convent. And St. Teresa would acknowledge that. They say, including the election of its superiors from among its own members. We are astonished that in our day and age, even some members of the Holy See itself refuse to follow the guidance of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, regarding the dignity of and respect for women. How dare you claim that somehow the Vatican isn't following Pope Francis on this? The Vatican is speaking on behalf of Pope Francis. It's you guys who aren't following Pope Francis. You're schismatics. You're in rebellion. You have the spirit of rebellion behind you. And you dare to appeal to Pope Francis, the one that you're undermining? Pope Francis said, let us respect their dignity, their basic rights. Nobody's violated the dignity or basic rights of women here. And if we don't, our society will not progress. Let us pray that the dignity and worth of women be recognized in every culture, and for an end to the discrimination they face in the various parts of the world. That has literally nothing to do with their situation. This is psychotic. We thank our faithful friends and supporters and assure them of our continued prayers, just as we continue to pray for the Holy Father and for the bishop in the Diocese of Fort Worth. The bishop that you have sued, the Pope that you don't listen to. This is what schismatics do. This is all just gaslighting. Something has gotten into them. Some spirit of rebellion, confusion, delusion has gotten into them. And they will no longer listen to church authority. That tells you this is not from God. This is from Satan. This is not the way to holiness. I didn't expect them to obey the Holy See. But I said, hey, we can hope. But there it is. There it is. Clearly, they are not going to obey the Holy See. The next step seems to me would need to be excommunication. And the second attempt, by the way, of the prioress attempting to go to the convent was accompanied by a representative from the diocese, a priest, who was going to celebrate the liturgy of the Missal of 62 for them, since they're very attached to that missal. But they would not let the priest or the prioress in. And so the representative from the diocese, I'm sure, clearly saw that they are not listening and complying to church authority. So I think it's pretty clear what the bishop needs to do. They're hell-bent, quite literally hell-bent, on going down this path. And okay, you can go down that path, but you can't be Catholic. You can't claim to be Catholic while doing it. You go be a Protestant all you want as a set of contes, but do not claim that you're Catholic. And I'm quite certain they won't be able to for much longer. I'm sure the diocese is doing everything it can to exhaust all alternatives before it comes to that. But I just don't see any other alternatives at this point. Are there any other options left? Seems to me like they're at the end of their rope. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so here we have Bishop Conley, who released a statement today on the ministry of America's bishops in response to Pope Francis's criticism of certain U.S. bishops in his 60 Minutes interview. So we're going to take a look at that here in just a moment, right after this. Hey friends, I'm now teaching as an adjunct professor at Catholic Polytechnic University, and I am excited to announce that we will be offering the first ever Magisterial Studies certificate program. It consists of 3 courses: an introduction to the magisterium, councils, dogmas, canons, and decrees, and evaluating magisterial teachings. If you want to further your education and learn more about Catholic teaching authority, this is the program for you. Check out catholicpolytechnic.org and click on the certificate tab at the top to sign up for the course today. All right, let's continue. I'm going to share my screen. Let's take a look at his statement. He says, 11 years into this pontificate, Francis remains popular among Americans who identify as Catholics. Some 75% of self-described Catholics in this country have a positive view of the Holy Father. This shouldn't be a surprise. His care for the poor and marginalized, his concern for the environment, and his witness to peace have widespread appeal. But, as with all modern leaders, Francis is not without critics. His past comments about backward-looking and reactionary attitudes in American Catholic life have caused resentment among some faithful Catholics. Well, let me stop it right there. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. Because he's right. He is dead on. There is some backward looking, and I don't mean in any kind of traditional way. I don't mean in any sense of affirming tradition. I mean the people who claim to affirm tradition, but they don't. They claim to be looking into the past and tradition, but they're not. And that's what he's talking about. And reactionary, absolutely reactionary. Yes. And obviously this is not all American Catholics that he's referring to. He's talking about some American Catholics. And it's not unique to American Catholics. I mean, it's a problem worldwide. But it is, I think, indicative of some American Catholics. So yeah, I mean, he's right to address that. The fact that it has caused resentment among some faithful Catholics is because those faithful Catholics are confused and haven't done due diligence to see what Pope Francis is really getting at. So either they are faithful Catholics who are misunderstanding the Holy Father, or they're not actually faithful Catholics, one of the two. Could be a combination of the two. In his view of church leadership in the United States, often perceived as negative, and his view of church leadership in the United States, often perceived as negative, has perplexed American bishops who, as a body, have a long record of loyalty and generosity to the Holy See. Maybe as a body, that could be argued. But I would point out 2 things to His Excellency. Pope Francis isn't talking about the American bishops as a body. So to appeal to how the bishops are as a body is irrelevant here, because Pope Francis's critics has not been to the American bishops as a body. You'll recall Pope Francis's comments in reference to American bishops was in the context of the American bishops who criticized Pope Francis. That's not all American bishops. It's not the American bishops as a body. But since we are going to talk about American bishops as a body, and His Excellency is going to put this out in public rather than in private, rather than just privately addressing Pope Francis with his concerns since he wants to bring this into the public forum for open discussion. Let's have a conversation about that. I asked some honest questions. Have the bishops in America as a body really done everything that they can to back up Pope Francis? Honest question. Honest question. Have they? It seems to me that the American bishops have, as a body, have been missing in action in some very key conflicts in the church right now. So while I'm sure His Excellency really believes that this is the case, and to an extent, I'm sure it is true, I think that there has been a failure on part of the American bishops to defend the Holy Father in some very key and critical issues in this pontificate. So since he wants to bring that up, that needs to be considered. But again, Pope Francis's comments weren't in reference to the American bishops as a body. It was in reference to the ones who criticize him, overly criticize him. Strickland, Vigano, Burke. That is who he was responding to. That is who he was reacting to, not the American bishops as a body. So let's keep that in mind. A possible pastoral visit to the United States recently reported in a fringe Catholic newspaper would be welcome and could be an opportunity for the Holy Father to see the Catholic Church here in a different light. True, that would help. You know what would have helped? If the bishops as a body had defended Pope Francis, at least in a fraction of the cases that he has been targeted by many vicious critics, even in the United States, even from the Episcopal rank in some cases. That would have also helped to establish a good impression on Pope Francis's part. So rather than saying, hey, well, if he just comes and sees how we are, well, yeah, or the United States bishops as a body could come out and defend Pope Francis a little bit more, because he's getting attacked by some of their own. And I haven't heard them addressing that. When was the last time you heard the American bishops as a body address Vigano's insane slander against Pope Francis? Or the wild stuff going on with Strickland? Have they come out as a body and addressed that and defended Pope Francis? It seems to me that they've been missing in action in some pretty important battles that really concerns them because they're American bishops. That would also help. The fact that they don't collectively come to his defense sometimes, I'm sure makes Pope Francis kind of feel like, well, hey, if you're going to let some of your bishops attack me viciously like this and you're not going to say a word, well, I guess to some extent you condone that. So I could see how the Holy Father probably wouldn't have a great view of American bishops in light of that. Now, again, that might not be reflective of how the American bishops are as a body. I understand that. But a failure to speak up in some of these areas, I'm sure has led him to feel slighted. On the matter of bishops, he says, I have some experience. A Catholic convert in my college years ago. In my college years, I went on to be ordained a priest and served for a decade in Rome as an official in the Vatican's congregation, now dicastery, for bishops, the office tasked with evaluating and recommending men for the episcopate. The work was largely bureaucratic. It consisted of research, reports, meetings, correspondence, and related staff duties, but it was a thorough education in the strengths and potential problems in the selection process for ministry as a bishop. Based on what I saw and staffed, the process was and remains sound. Not perfect, but nonetheless objective in essence, with plenty of checks and balances along the way. I'll have to take his word for it. I feel like if that's the truth, then why do we have such a problem with some of these bishops? It's strictly confidential, which precludes public lobbying, campaigning, and political maneuvering, at least in the manner so common in the secular world. It's also highly consultative, involving 25 to 40 clergy and lay consultations with men and women familiar with the candidate under their consideration. All this is governed by canon law and directed by the apostolic nuncio, the papal ambassador in each given country. He says, I've been away from Rome now for nearly 2 decades. I've experienced the selection process from its other end. I've served as a bishop in the United States for the past 16 years, both as an auxiliary and now as an ordinary, the bishop in charge of a diocese. No matter what a man knows in advance, the ministry of a local bishop is a surprise and a challenge. I can see that. Whatever social prestige Catholic bishops once enjoyed is long gone. I don't know about that one. Whatever social prestige Catholic bishops once enjoyed is long gone. I can see how the reputation of Catholic bishops has been tarnished with the abuse crisis, as he points out. I can see that, but honestly, from where I stand, it still seems to me that the bishops live like kings and get served like kings. It still seems to me that they have that prestige. So I don't know if this is exactly true. I think that might be stretching it. Surely they have taken a hit, but I don't know if they've taken that much of a hit, because it seems to me they live like kings on the whole. The clergy abuse crisis buried it. Today, the reality can be quite the opposite. But this is not finally a loss, because true Christian leadership is a privilege only insofar as it involves service to others in a spirit of humility. Amen. I agree with that. I don't know if that's indicative of everyone. That's probably indicative of him, but I don't know if that's indicative of everybody, you know. But I appreciate what he's saying here. In my case, life as a bishop has been a blessing because my brother U.S. bishops have been overwhelmingly good, committed men. It's good to hear. They have very different skills and personalities, all have strengths and weaknesses, and none of them is close to perfect, but they're faithful to the church and devoted to their people. Not all of them. Not all of them. Let's be honest. Not all of them. So some of them we are seeing are very much in dissent against the magisterium. But I guess he's speaking just kind of in general. They're also unquestionably loyal to Pope Francis. Not all of them. And I think what's unfortunate is for those who haven't been loyal to Pope Francis, and more importantly, loyal to the magisterium, because it's not about a particular pope, it's about the magisterium. The fact that they are vocally in dissent against Pope Francis, and the fact that collectively the U.S. bishops haven't called him out. Frankly, almost none of the bishops have publicly called him out. I'm pretty sure that makes Pope Francis feel like, yeah, no, I don't think that you guys are loyal to, to this pontificate. I could totally see how Pope Francis would feel that way. I mean, honest question. Have you heard any bishop rebuking Vigano? Rebuking Burke? Rebuking Strickland? Some might say, well, it's being done privately. Okay. That only takes you so far, because the chaos that they've created has been public, and the slander that some of them have engaged in has been public, and the confusion that they've created has been public, and therefore a public response from the bishops is necessary, not private, public. And have the United States bishops as a whole, or frankly, even individually, have they addressed this stuff? Honestly, I feel from where I sit, I feel they're missing in action. Why is it that me as a layman has to review this stuff and tell you why it's wrong? Why aren't bishops doing that more? Why aren't they saying something? Why aren't they giving some direction to the faithful? I suspect it's because they're not aware of how severe the situation is. And that might be why they have this disconnect between what Pope Francis is saying and what they think, because they're thinking, hey, we're really loyal. Maybe you're not aware of some of this other stuff. They're also unquestionably loyal to Pope Francis, which makes his ambiguities and seeming criticisms difficult to understand. I'm sorry, but he's not being ambiguous here. I'm not buying the ambiguity card, with all due respect to His Excellency. I don't believe the successor of St. Peter is being ambiguous. I don't know where that's coming from. I know that's where the critics, I know that comes from them and what they're saying, but I don't know where that comes from his perspective. Um, and then seeming criticisms difficult to understand. Maybe if you're not aware of what all's going on in the church right now in the United States, it's difficult to understand. But if you're aware of what's going on right now, and I think bishops need to be, of all people, it's the bishops who need to be, it wouldn't be difficult to understand. It would actually be very easy to understand. So what this tells me is His Excellency is sincerely confused by what Pope Francis is saying, most likely because he's not aware of how severe the situation has become. And that tells me, well, that explains why they're not speaking up. That explains it right there. So they're kind of blindsided by this, but they shouldn't be. They kind of should already know. Now, again, in fairness to the bishops, look, they're busy. I get it. They got a lot of stuff going on, but you got to have some advisors or something that are keeping an eye on this. And hey, look, Bishop Conley, I'll help you out. I'll be an advisor to you for free if you want. I can tell you what's going on in the church in the United States so that you don't have to go and, keep up with all that. I get it. You're a busy man. Have other people do that for you. Get good people who can do that for you on your team. There's people who do it for free. I'll do it for free. Any bishop out there who wants advice on what is going on social media, what is going on with Catholics in the United States, hey, I'm certainly available. I'm here. And I'm sure that there are many others who are out there who will do it for free. He says, so what's the point of these thoughts? Simply this: before the Holy Father makes his next visit to the United States, I'd ask him to spend a little time familiarizing himself with the real terrain of American Catholic life. I know this was well-intentioned, but I'm not sure this was a good look. I honestly think that Bishop Conley and the rest in the United States need to familiarize themselves with their own terrain first. You can't expect the Holy Father to familiarize himself with the terrain of American Catholic life when it seems to me the bishops in the United States aren't familiar with their own terrain. I wouldn't have said that. I certainly wouldn't have posted this publicly. I don't know why he made this a public article when he can contact the Holy Father directly and privately. He has access to the Holy Father, so he could have sent this feedback to him directly. Since he wants, however, to bring this into the public forum, it's fair for us to comment on it publicly. And I'll do so with all due respect to His Excellency and for his office. I don't know if this was the right move, because I kind of feel like that's advice that both he and the rest of the bishops in the United States need to take to heart first before they can ask Pope Francis to do this. He says that Francis needs to do this because so much of it is hopeful and good despite the many challenges we face. Well, I really hope that's true. I really hope that's true. That's be a wonderful thing, right? If the situation in the United States, were hopeful and good despite some challenges, I really hope that's true. But from where I stand, I think that might be minimizing the challenges. As one of my brother bishops notes in the recent book, True Confessions, Voices of Faith from a Life in the Church, there's a great hunger for beauty among our nation's Catholics. The sacramental imagination is still alive, and if you feed that imagination, people's needs for something sacred and true, something beautiful and greater than themselves, and combine it with active outreach and social ministry, the results are impressive. It gives me a lot of hope. When you watch our young parents and children get all excited as they discover Jesus Christ and his church, you realize that the same message was preached 20 centuries ago, and it still has enormous impact despite all the world's distractions and changes in culture and technology. The Lord continues to do his work, and the work still bears fruit. We just need to be nimbler in addressing the challenges that are coming our way, and we need to be more willing to speak the truth, even when it's not welcome, even when it has a cost. The men in our country who accept an appointment as bishop today are, by and large, men who know full and well that they will suffer. I, I don't know. This is just a very different world than the one I live in and what I see. I'm sorry, I just don't see the bishops suffering like that in the United States. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misinformed. Again, I understand that they're taking some heat for the abuse crisis. Okay, I get that. I don't know if they're really suffering that much. It seems to me like they're pretty privileged. It seems to me like they live pretty good. I don't know. They're men who are ready to carry the cross of Christian leadership and have prepared themselves through deep prayer. Okay, I hope that's the case. Faithful theological formation and pastoral experience in the trenches. I really hope that's the case. I really do. Their eyes are wide open to the social and cultural toxicity of our times. I'm not sure that's true. I don't think they realize how severe it is in their own territory. While the future will not be easy, they were made for these times. I hope that's true. And those who are chosen and who accept the call to serve as a bishop are, in my estimation, zealous for the task. They need and they deserve encouragement, clarity, and support from the man who holds the office of Peter. Okay. With all due respect, the Holy Father is the one who I think has the greater need for encouragement and support from the U.S. bishops. Yes, it's a two-way street, and Pope Francis needs to encourage and support them. Sure. But it seems to me like Pope Francis is the one taking most of the heat from American bishops. Not all of them, but some. And it seems to me like the American bishops collectively, and many of them individually, are silent on that matter. Where are they in encouraging the successor of St. Peter? And I also want to say, if the bishops want their leader to give them support, I want to say that's exactly how many laity feel about our bishops. We want our leaders, our bishops, to give us support. And frankly, I don't know if there has been a lot of support. I kind of have to, again, bring us back to the question, where are the bishops in addressing the massive crisis right now in the Catholic Church with radical traditionalism and radical progressivism? Both, from both directions. We're having to deal with both of those battles from two fronts. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of laity who feel like the bishops might be missing in action here. They're just not aware of what's going on. And some of us don't feel very supported by the episcopate. And so if they want support from their hierarchs, or their higher ups, I should say, their leaders, they have to make sure that they are doing that as leaders themselves. Because if I, as a father, if I want my dad to be supportive of me as his son, I have to also ask the question, am I being supportive of my children? It's a fair question, right? If I want support from my father, I, as a father, also need to ask the question, am I being supportive of my children? And if I'm failing to some degree in that duty, I'm sure my children will be a little confused and scratching their head if they heard me saying, well, I wish my dad supported me a little bit more. They'd probably be thinking, well, you're one to talk. I wish you supported me more, So, okay, sure, maybe Pope Francis can work on this. I think they could also work on being supportive of them. But I think they might need to ask the question, are they being supportive of the laity and the faithful who are out there fighting zealously for the faith? with very little Episcopal support. I mean, just a statement from a bishop would go a long way, a really long way. Have any of the bishops called out Taylor Marshall and all the wackiness that we see going on online with online Catholicism? Have any of them called it out? Just one statement from them would go a long way. So when I read this, I kind of feel like, maybe this should have been private to Pope Francis, because when you put it out there in public, it's fair for us to discuss this respectfully. Canon 212, expressing our concerns publicly. So when you put these concerns out publicly with the Holy Father, it's fair for laity to publicly express some concerns about this. And he says Pope Francis can provide all three. We should hope and pray that he will do exactly that. Well, I honestly feel like they need to take the focus off what Pope Francis needs to do, and they need to ask some questions like, what can they be doing? With all due respect. And there's a lot of stuff that I could recommend if they're asking, if they want to know. Yeah, back to Ashley says, why was this letter made public? That's a good question. I don't know if that was the right angle. Again, since he made this public, it's free for us to discuss it and express concerns with anything in there. But yeah, I think that this may have been better for him to have sent to Pope Francis privately, because what this does is it opens it up for a two-way conversation. It's a two-way street. So if we're going to criticize Pope Francis for failing to support people who are under him, the bishops in the United States, okay, it's a two-way street. Maybe there's some room for conversation about criticism for a lack of Episcopal support for people who are under the bishops, priests, deacons, and laity. It opens up that conversation because it is a two-way street here. So to put it out there public, you open that conversation. And, I'm kind of glad he opened that conversation, because it's a conversation that really needs to be had. And perhaps we can charitably have that conversation with our shepherds by expressing our concerns to them. Since he made this public, I'm expressing my concerns public. If he had made them private, I would have expressed my concerns private. But again, since he made it public, it opens it up for me to express these concerns publicly. So if you're asking, Michael, why didn't you reach out to him privately? Because he expresses publicly. That's why. Making it public is further evidence of their bad judgment. I think it's probably not the best judgment for this situation, especially in light of the fact that the Holy Father is actually very justified in what he said, if properly understood. And I think bishops should be able to understand what he was saying. Again, I don't expect random people to follow what all's going on, but I think that bishops should, it's kind of their duty to know what's going on in the church, and they should be able to understand clearly what Pope Francis was saying. I don't think there's room for them to say he's ambiguous or it's puzzling. I don't think there's room for that. I could tell you what he's saying, and I'm just a layman. And if I could tell you that as a layman, surely a bishop would need to know what Pope Francis meant. Need and can. And again, if not through direct knowledge, through consultation of good advisors. And hey, I'm throwing out my availability. Any bishops who are listening, you want advice, you want help, I'm more than happy to offer it to you. You want a good perspective on what's going on a lay level on social media? I can give you a really good idea of what's going on and tell you a lot about that. And again, I'll offer my support to bishops for free. Because I love the church and I want to support the shepherds. I want to help them the best that I can. So I'm just throwing it out there. How many bishops are even digitally literate so that they understand the situation? Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they don't have the time, and I don't suspect that they would, That's understandable. I don't expect a bishop to be on Twitter all day long like Bishop Strickland or something. I don't expect them to do that. I understand that. What I'm saying is, at least have some really good advisors. You know, as a bishop, you want to have some really good advisors who are aware of what's going on and who can kind of tell you what's going on. So when you say, you know, when you see something from Pope Francis and you're like, this doesn't make sense, ask your advisor, and your advisor can say, actually, here's where Pope Francis is coming from, and there's some legitimacy to what he's saying, and then you would get that. So you would get that explanation, and then you don't have to publish public criticisms of Pope Francis like this. You don't have to do that because you then have good advisors who can tell you in private, actually, here's what Pope Francis is talking about. And then as a bishop, you can better understand it. It just reflects to me what I've already suspected for a while, and that is the bishops don't appear to be very aware of what all is going on right now in the church, in this particular area at least. And it seems to me they need some good advisors. How can we get your resume portfolio out there? Yeah, you can certainly email bishops, videos, this video, or any others that you feel relevant. Yeah, anything that you think is helpful. I know some bishops on occasion watch the show, but I just don't know how common that is, and so it seems to me that they could certainly use some help from laity and kind of filling them in on what all is going on. I mean, think about it like this. At the Second Vatican Council, or at many of the councils, you had pariti. You had people, you know, who were, you know, trained theologians there to advise the bishops. That's kind of what they need here, is not just trained theologians, but also people who are aware of just what's going on, feet on the ground, you know, what's going on in the trenches. It would help also if they're theologians at the same time. That would be nice. But not absolutely required if the person has a really good grasp of what's going on. But usually those things kind of go in hand. You really want to understand kind of what's going on and make sense of it. You do need to have some kind of theological training. Okay. I think there's a lot of division between the JP2 and Benedict XVI and those appointed by Pope Francis. Yeah. Have I heard of the priest who bit a woman while defending the Holy Sacrament? Yeah, I saw that. I sure did. See if I can pull it up. Trying to find it. Florida priest charged for biting arm of woman, he says, was desecrating Eucharist. At first, I didn't know how did biting come into this discussion, but I understand his hands were occupied in administering the Eucharist, so his only way to restrain her from desecrating the Eucharist was biting. That makes a little bit more sense. I get that. He was arrested for this. I don't know if that might be a badge of honor. I don't know if I'd fault him for the arrest. I'm not saying it was the best move, but it might kind of be a badge of honor. You know, it's one of those things. I don't exactly condone biting people, but at the same time, I kind of understand it. And so a priest in Florida bit the forearm of a woman he says was desecrating the Eucharist in the communion line at church this past Sunday and has now been charged with 1 count of battery. Father Fidel Rodriguez. Why did they mention his name, but the offender, her name, is not mentioned in anything? That's one concern of mine. Why is his name brought up, but her name isn't? I don't know. Admitted to police that he bit the woman, but said he did so only after she reached into the ciborium and tried to grab a host from it, damaging other hosts as she did so. I think that he should have remained silent and neither confirm nor deny. but just say he wants an attorney before he comments on it. I don't think he should have admitted to it. I'm not saying he should lie and deny it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is don't do either. Don't speak to the police unless you have an attorney present. Because what would have happened is, I suspect, since the video didn't actually show the biting, unless the lady really wanted to push it and get other witnesses there, he could have avoided this altogether, the arrest altogether, by not commenting on it at all. Because again, she would have to substantiate her claim at that point and get some kind of witnesses. I would think that that's how it would go. I don't know. The only defense that I found to defend something that for us, for all of us, is sacred was biting her. Again, his hands were occupied, so I kind of get it. I have recognized that I bite her. I'm not denying that. Rodriguez told police, according to body camera video obtained by CNA. I recognize that I bite her as a defense and as defending myself and defending the sacrament, he said in English with a Spanish accent. Well, I don't know if he needed to defend himself because I don't know if he was being assaulted. But I know she was desecrating the Eucharist, so that part I get. I don't know if he was being assaulted, though. The woman told police the priest denied her communion after she refused to answer his questions about whether she had been to confession recently. I just wanted a cookie, that's all, the woman told police, according to the body camera video. It seems to me, from looking further into the situation, that she was trying to provoke some kind of reaction, and she had an agenda because she is a lesbian, and she was trying to get some reaction out of the priest. How do I know that? Because she says, I think he denied me the priest because I'm a lesbian and because of the way I dress, even though he had told her, no, it's not because of any of those things. It's because you don't appear to know what the Eucharist is, and therefore you don't appear to be a Catholic, nor do you appear to be in a state of grace because you say you haven't been to confession in ages. So that's what it is. It has nothing to do with, targeting you as a lesbian or something like that. So I think that she was trying to provoke something so that she could make this into a situation of he's persecuting me because I'm lesbian. And that's the way it comes across when I've listened to her side. But anybody who says, I just wanted a cookie, that's all. Is she all the way there mentally? Of course not. Of course not. Clearly, there's some mental issues going on here. Firefighters treated the arm of the woman at the police station. She refused to go to a hospital, according to the police video. I didn't know that. I didn't know that firefighters medically treat people at police stations, nonetheless. Police in St. Cloud, Florida, have charged Rodriguez with one count of battery stemming from the incident, which occurred during the noon at Mass on St. Thomas Aquinas Church. St. Cloud is a city of 65,000 people outside of Orlando. Woman told police she went to the 10 a.m. Mass with her same-sex partner because it was the woman's niece's first communion. The parish's video of the 10 a.m. Mass shows an interaction between the priest and the woman, who neither presents her hands to receive the host nor opens her mouth to receive her on the tongue. The priest and the woman speak about 45 seconds. Holding up the communion line, though their conversation can't be heard over the music and singing. The woman later told police she suspected the priest wouldn't give her communion because of the way she was dressed and because of her sexual orientation. You see, she was trying to elicit this kind of dramatic, public confrontation because she wants to make this about her sexual orientation. Quite despicable. And what does that even say about you at that point, right? It wasn't about any of that. Again, the priest has said what it was about. She says, I believe that his excuse was that I wasn't super holy in his eyes. That's not what he said. It wasn't because you're not super holy. It's because you don't know what the Eucharist is and you haven't been to confession. So even if you are Catholic, you haven't even been to confession in years, so you're not in a state of grace to receive. It's not about being super holy. It's about at least being in a state of grace and believing in the real presence. Those are basic conditions. The woman who was wearing a white shirt and pants told the police, I believe that his excuse was that I was a super holy. But the priest told police sexual orientation had nothing to do with it. When the woman didn't hold her hand out on one on top of the other or open her mouth and didn't say amen after he said body of Christ, he said he knew she didn't know what she was doing. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious at that point. You're not dealing with a Catholic. So I think his story makes sense. Hers is ridiculous. The cookie lady. That's why I'm going to call her, because she won't evidently identify herself, or they won't identify her. The cookie lady. He said he asked her when the last time she received communion was, and she said it was many years ago. There you go. And he said if she had gone to confession, she replied, I don't need to explain that to you. Actually, you do. Actually, you do. And you found out the hard way. He said he told her that he has the authority to ask her that question and that he could not give her communion, but he could give her a blessing instead, which he said he did. There goes that notion of blessing people who aren't in a state of grace again. The woman and her partner then went to the noon mass in Spanish, which Rodriguez celebrated, and the woman again went to him to receive communion. He told police he asked her if she had gone to confession in between masses. Of course she didn't. According to him, she replied, no, I don't need to explain to you. I don't need to give you an explanation. You don't have authority. You don't need to judge me. I love when really ignorant people want to talk about, you can't judge me, as if they know anything about Scripture and about what Jesus was saying when he spoke about judge not. Even though they tend to be the most judgmental people themselves, by the way. To which he said, I'm not judging you. I'm asking you only, did you confess after the other mass to receive the communion now? Because if you did not confess, I can't give you the communion. And by the way, it's perfectly fine for him to judge her. Jesus is not against that. Jesus is against hypocritical judging, not all judging. So it's perfectly fine for him to judge her. And she grabbed all of the hosts in the hands because she wants to receive for herself. She's not permitted, and she breaks all the hosts, spreading them, the priest said. Priest said he was worried that she would spill the hosts on the floor. The Catholic Church teaches the Eucharist is the actual body and blood of Jesus, whom Catholics worship as God. The Church also teaches to receive communion as a person must be a Catholic in a state of grace, meaning not being mindful of having committed a serious sin without getting absolution from a priest in confession. The woman told police that during the second mass, the priest forced it in my mouth, which she didn't want. Which I have questions there. Why would he be giving her communion? I'm confused here. And she clearly did not need to be given communion. So from what this is indicating, he gave her communion? Why? I don't know. Maybe she's lying. I don't know. He wouldn't give me a cookie. I don't know if it was how I'm dressed. You know what it's like, the woman said. I needed to go do confession and do all this. I needed to go to mass every Sunday or whatever. And I said, that doesn't matter. I've done everything I needed to do as a kid. I'm just here to accept the bread. And he wouldn't give it to me. Lady, you're a perfect example of somebody who does not need to be receiving the communion. It's like, what we could do is we could take your comment here and we could use that in all catechetical courses in the future of, here's how to know you're not properly disposed to receive the Eucharist. Check these boxes. If you meet any one of these, you are not properly disposed. I basically need to do confession. I just wanted a cookie. I need to go to mass every Sunday or whatever. I said, that doesn't matter. I've done everything I need to do as a kid. I'm just here to accept the bread, and he wouldn't give it to me. What is it? And I'm not good at front. I tried to just grab another cookie, and that when he grabbed my hand, he just bit me. So I'm trying to figure this out. Did he actually give her communion? And she didn't want to receive from him. She wanted to receive from herself. So he gave her communion, just kind of get rid of her kind of thing. And she didn't like that. So she grabbed it. Now I have questions like, Father, why'd you give her communion? You shouldn't. I don't think that's right. So, but maybe she's lying. I'm not going to even front. I tried to just grab another cookie. The Cookie Monster strikes again. And I'm not going to front. When he grabbed my hand, he just bit me. Somebody asked in the comment section, is this satire? It seems like it, right? But I actually saw video footage of her doing this. But they had her face blurred out, so I couldn't figure out who this person would be. So, video of the incident published by WFTV Channel 9 in Orlando shows the woman's hand in the ciborium, which is the bowl that holds communion wafers, while the priest holds onto it with both hands. It also shows the priest moving his head down toward the woman's right arm, but does not show the actual bite. Right. See if we can see it. See her face is blurred here. And she wanted to say that he's targeting her because of the way that she's dressed. Is it her or her? I mean, her I can understand, but this, I don't think he's targeting you for wearing long sleeve shirts. I don't think that's it. But okay. Let's actually watch that. I just wanted a cookie. He wouldn't let me have it.
Mass happens every Sunday at St. Thomas Aquinas Church in St. Cloud, and there, like churches all over the world this past Sunday, parishioners received communion. But this unidentified woman says when she tried, she was bit by the priest, identifying him on this body camera as Father Fidel. She told St. Cloud police the scuffle started when she tried to receive communion.
He wouldn't give me a cookie. I don't know if it was
Because the way,
you know, or what it is that I like.
A witness telling police in this report that she was singled out because of her sexuality and attire.
Yeah, that's what it is. He just doesn't like people in white shirts. Mm-hmm. And he totally knew what your sexuality was. Absolutely, that's what it is. Not all this other stuff. It's because you're wearing a white shirt, and it's because you're a lesbian. Yeah. See what I'm saying? I think that she came there looking to start something and to try to turn it into some victory for the LGBTQ crowd, and instead ended up embarrassing them. Somehow I didn't think that was possible, but it was.
so that he forcefully tried to shove it and like put it in her mouth. Of course, backed up. She's like, no, don't do that. She tried to get it, and then that's when he like went crazy.
Here you can see some of that confrontation from a feed the church streams online. But the priest told police a different story. He said the woman came to the 10 o'clock mass but didn't seem to know the process of receiving, so he denied her the bread. He said she came back to another service and tried again, but this time the confrontation happened when she tried to grab the bread out of his hand, telling police he was protecting the bread because it's considered the body of Christ.
Oh, Father, you're not in your clerics? I'm just kidding.
I'm not joking you. I'm asking you only. Did you confess after the other mass to receive communion? No.
Never talk to police without a lawyer present.
No. Because if you confess, I can't give you communion. I buy her. I'm not denying that. I'm as defending myself and
Father, never do it. Don't do it. Have your attorney present.
defending the sacrament.
And made it clear that was the only reason, telling those same officers that he didn't know her or what her sexual orientation is and doesn't care about that.
I don't use nobody.
I spoke to the priest the woman identified on the body camera by phone. He did not want to answer questions and hung up. And when we showed up at the church today, we were greeted by this man, but he didn't want to talk. Does the church want to make a comment since you're over here?
Talk to the Diocese of Orlando.
The article continues. The Diocese of Orlando released a statement Thursday supporting the priest's efforts to defend the Eucharist while not endorsing the bite. That's kind of my position on it. I don't endorse the bite, but I do support the priest in defending the Eucharist, although I'm still trying to figure out, did he actually give her communion? It sounded like he gave her communion. She didn't like that because she wanted to receive it herself, not him distributing it to her. So she then goes and grabs more. And I want to say, well, why'd you give her communion? The statement notes that during the noon mass, the priest offered the woman communion on the tongue. See what I'm saying? So even the statement is noting that. She wasn't in a state of grace. So, and you knew she wasn't in a state of grace. You knew she wasn't disposed to receive the Eucharist. So why even give it to her? Look, I get sacrilege and all that, and what she did is sacrilegious. It's also sacrilegious to give communion to a person that you know is not in a state of grace. Now, I don't think that his involvement in this is even comparable to what she did, though. So I do want to point that out. At that point, the woman forcefully placed her hand in the vessel and grabbed some sacred communion hosts, crushing them, having only one hand free. Father Rodriguez struggled to restrain the woman as she refused to let go of the host. When the woman pushed him in reacting to a perceived act of aggression, Father Rodriguez bit her hand so she would let go of the host she had grabbed. The woman was immediately asked to leave, the diocese said in a written statement. It should be noticed Father Rodriguez had no prior knowledge of the woman's background. Further, with the Diocese of Orlando, does not condone physical altercations such as this. In good faith, Father Rodriguez was simply attempting to prevent an act of desecration of Holy Communion, which as a priest, Father Rodriguez is bound by duty to protect. Agreed. That does include, however, not giving communion to her as well. The statement concludes, the full video and the police report show the woman initiated physical contact and acted inappropriately. The priest was trying to protect the Holy Communion from this sacrilegious act. Fair enough. That also includes not giving her a Holy Communion when she's not in a state of grace. In the Catholic tradition, the Eucharist is considered the source of some... Okay, catechesis moment. A police spokesman told CNA on Thursday that the state attorney's office will determine the next step in the case. Rodriguez did not respond to a request from CNA for comment. There you go. Y'all wanted it. There it is. Not going to have time to go through it, but I did want to just show you the headline. Catholic bishops sue Biden administration over abortion provisions in pregnant workers law. Maybe go and check out Catholic News Agency that has this article on it by Tyler Arnold. So go and check that out. I was going to review it, but we're out of time since we reviewed the other one. Anyways, hopefully y'all found this helpful. And if you did, hit that like button and, of course, the subscribe button. Let's see. We're trying to get the channel to 100,000. What are we at right now? 98,935. Okay. So we need 65 more to get to 99K. And then we'll need 1,000 more after that. So y'all get on it. If you have not subscribed already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so that we could get the channel to 100K and, help reach new people. More people subscribe, more people. YouTube will reach or will communicate this to other people. David says, see you at 99,666. That's hilarious. Yeah, let's certainly try to do so, especially after we're seeing that on other platforms, they're trying to shut me down. TikTok, especially. So, again, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. See you later. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.